Well, the spoopathon must go on. Hello everyone, Britton here, also known as Smoky Dude, and today I am covering, BAM! Victor LaValle's The Devil in Silver. This is the second novel that I read from Victor LaValle. The first one was The Ballad of Black Tom, which I thought was an excellent novella. And then I read this, and it has once again solidified that Victor LaValle might be one of my favorite horror writers working right now. I thought this book was fantastic. The best advice that I've gotten as a journalist is that good journalism should piss you off. And I think that good literature, great literature even, should make you pissed off as well. But then I got a comment on one of my reviews that I did saying that good literature should make you feel something in general, and I actually agreed with that, so I kind of had to switch it up a little bit. But yes, good literature, great literature, should make you feel something. And despite the fact that The Devil in Silver does not fit into one genre, I do believe it's safe to say that The Devil in Silver is a magnificent piece of horror literature. You know, I'm someone who often rails against the way that people are treated, people are incarcerated in this country. I think our prison system is terrible. And I also think that the way that people who are mentally ill are terrible. But I'll try not to get too political on this episode, though. But when I read this book, I have to say that it really spoke to the choir. It's a very angry book, but it's also a very compassionate look into the minds of people who are mentally ill and are stuck in a system that really is quite awful to say, but doesn't really give a shit about them. While I was expecting this book to have scenes where mentally ill people were treated like shit, and there were scenes of that, I was definitely not expecting just the levels of neglect, banal cruelty, and just utter indifference that I read in this book. I mean, there are some truly heartbreaking parts in this story where people are just completely apathetic to the concerns of these people who so desperately need mental help, and it's really sad. And there's just this utter indifference shown by the people who are supposed to be protecting these people and helping them to get better, and they're not doing it. The theme of institutionalization runs through The Devil in Silver and is a huge theme throughout the entirety of the story. Now, while I think this book will inevitably be compared to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is one of my favorite films, the book is also very good as well, but I just freaking love the movie. I was more reminded of The Shawshank Redemption, not just the book by Stephen King, but the movie. And I'm reminded of the line from Morgan Freeman where he says, well, first you hate these walls, then you get used to them, and then eventually you grow to depend on them. And a very similar thing happens in The Devil in Silver. It definitely, Pepper, the main character, kind of goes through this journey, and it's not a fun one. There's a lot of cutting corners, again, a lot of just basic neglect and indifference from the people who are supposed to be helping these mentally ill people, and just moments where I was just completely disgusted by the idea that this could be happening in our real world. And sad to say, it probably does happen in our world. This book is not a happy one, and the characters are often left to their own devices by the people who are supposed to be protecting them, like I mentioned earlier. But not all is bleak. There is a lot of heart in this book, especially from the characters. I mean, the characters in this are fantastic, but I don't want to get too carried away. There's even a lot of really great, absurd moments in this. I mean, there's a great moment in this where that's seared into my brain, where Pepper, our main character, gets into a bit of a scuffle with another one of the prisoners, who is actually, or I say prisoners, patients. This one's name is Coffee, who has a weird obsession with the shitty payphones in the hospital wing where they're at, and Pepper just ain't having it. And he's also high off his ass on, not Quaaludes, probably Quaaludes, but it's the tranquilizers meant to, like, keep them under control. He's basically, drugged up, and it's just, it's I don't want to spoil it, but it's an utterly ridiculous scene, I love it. I think it's a great moment. And it's moments like that that make The Devil in Silver a really fun book to read, despite the fact that it's often sad. I would say that Victor LaValle shares Stephen King's ability to create these great characters who you really feel for and you really understand. He really makes these people feel alive with their strange quirks and eccentricities that feels unique to them. Like, like I mentioned, there's a character named Coffee who's just obsessed with the payphones. And we also see this with Pepper as well. Pepper is not mentally ill, as I mentioned before, but he gets into this mental hospital because of some, going back to that indifference / neglect. He gets into a situation where he gets stuffed into this place and then he can't get out. All the characters that LaValle introduces are really unique individuals, and they all have their strange quirks. They all have their strange eccentricities that really make them feel real, that make them memorable in their own way. And I'm really glad that LaValle never stoops to preaching his message like, oh, the way we treat mentally ill people is really terrible. I would say, well, yeah, I kind of gathered that. But luckily, he shows you these people's plight and allows the message to go through the story, that really lets you go through the story. I would say, as I said before, The Devil in Silver defies genre. I mean, it's a supernatural horror, fantasy, social satire, protest novel, and that's just going through some of the genres that are touched upon in this. But what really kept me invested in this story were the characters. The characters in this story, again, it reminds me a lot of Stephen King. LaValle just has this ability to make these people who feel real, and they feel like people you could meet in the real world, even though that, they're fictional characters. All of them, and the character drama was so compelling. I mean, the supernatural elements are cool, but to be honest, if you took the supernatural elements out of this novel, like, it could have worked as just a regular realist novel where it's just about a bunch of people stuck in this mental hospital where, they're stuck there and they kind of have to make do. It's almost like they're in a little world of their own, if I didn't mention that before. And I don't know if saying that supernatural elements didn't need to be there is a bad or good thing, but I digress. It's what I think. But the supernatural elements are pretty good, and he does make some references to ancient mythology, especially the story of Theseus' story into the labyrinth, and it gives this book a sense of the gravitas that really kept me coming back to the journey. But ultimately, it was the humanity of the people who were in this story. Oh, hello, kitty. Just let you come here. But like I said, ultimately it's the humanity of these people that really kept me coming back. I mean, there's a lot of really great characters in this story. I mean, Pepper, Coffee, there's the one lady who's basically like the mother lady of the crew. Lucidia, she's a teenager who has some emotional issues. She actually got a novella of her own, which I have not read, but maybe I'll get around to it at some point. But I just really like The Devil in Silver, and aside from The Ballad of Black Tom, this might be my favorite of Victor LaValle's work so far. It's so funny. It's definitely compelling. I love the supernatural elements. I love the references to mythology. And I love how there's almost this... It's almost like this mental hospital, like I mentioned earlier, is a world of its own. There are the rooms. There's a lot of very tender moments as well, especially towards the latter of the novel where Pepper basically gets a girlfriend in the mental hospital. Very entertaining stuff. And when characters get beaten down, it feels awful. It's basically what you should do when you have a story. You should have characters that you really feel for and you want to see win, and when they don't win, it feels really bad. And LaValle really makes you care about these characters. So if you really like character-driven stories, I would recommend reading The Devil in Silver. and you might have a good time with it. It's definitely good. I've noticed in Victor LaValle's bibliography that he tends to play around with mythological stories. I mean, in Ballad of Black Tom, of course, he plays with the Lovecraft mythos. In The Changeling, he plays with... my reference to it is Hellboy, the corpse story. I basically, if The Changeling is basically the corpse as a novel, and there's no big demon man running around finding goblins who kidnapped a child. And in this, you get this all the same. There's a lot of discussion of, like I said, the labyrinth, the devil in silver. It's because there's this man, and I really like that they keep it vague if it's a genuine supernatural thing or if it's some kind of delusion. It is implied that it's real, but we don't know why this is the case, and they never reveal the monster all too much. But yeah, I really enjoyed The Devil in Silver. I think it's a fantastic novel, and Victor LaValle, man, he really can write a great novel. The prose is really well done. I love the characters, and it's just a beautiful story. And I do recommend this. One of my October reads from last year, and it was well worth the wait. I really was looking forward to reading this. But yeah, I think that's all I really have to say today. If you want to check me out on Twitter, you can find me at SomeOkieDude on Twitter. You can check me out on Goodreads and Letterboxd, where I write reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. And you can find me on Discord, where you can come talk to me and get to know about my opinions about the world and books and movies and all sorts of stuff. It's beautiful. But yeah, until next time, I've been Britton, also known as SomeOkieDude. We'll see you guys later.